Okay, well, we're going to get started, and we are going to record this tonight for people who couldn't make it live. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Christina Bohnsack from the Capital Region Clean Energy Hub, and we manage the Heat Smart Capital Region campaign, which has partnered with Columbia County on a clean heating and cooling and energy efficiency campaign. So we're just going to tell you a little bit more about what that means. The Capital Region Clean Energy Hub is pretty new. It's something the governor just announced a few months ago. It's funded by NYSERDA, and they're being formed all over the state to kind of be a one-stop shop for people interested in clean energy, because the technology is changing so much, the financials are changing so much, and the need for the workforce is changing so much. So we are the thing that hopefully you can come to and get all of your questions answered for any of those things. The Capital Region Hub is 8 nonprofit organizations with different expertise and outreach areas focused on helping residents to have non-biased help making good energy decisions. We're developing strategic partnerships with municipalities, nonprofit organizations, workforce development programs, advocacy groups, grassroots community organizations, and underserved areas to bring important energy-related information to their networks and communities. The Hub's goals are just what you see here. We're going to look at the region and assess why these programs maybe haven't had as many people utilizing them as we'd like. We're going to see what needs to change to make the green workforce as strong as it needs to be to really reach the goals of the Climate Act, the CLCPA, which maybe some of you have heard about. It's one of the strongest pieces of legislation in the country for trying to mitigate climate change. And we're also trying to increase participation in historically underserved communities, which includes rural communities such as ours in Columbia County. So Columbia County has embarked on a clean heating and cooling and energy efficiency campaign. And that means that as people sign up for clean heating and cooling in their homes, the county can track that and be able to apply for grants to put clean heating and cooling into their municipal buildings and things like that. The county government and 13 different municipalities are at various stages of this. So it's pretty likely that you live in one that's participating, and you may be able to help them in putting a solar panel up or a heat pump in your town hall or something like that. So it's a great thing to keep in mind. So the way that these programs work is through NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Association. And they have a bunch of residential programs that include energy audits, Empower, assisted home performance, financing heat pumps, and as well as education on low-cost measures. And a major goal of the hub is to increase residential clean energy projects in disadvantaged communities, elderly populations, rural populations, et cetera. NYSERDA programs aim to make smart energy use more affordable. NYSERDA is currently working to merge 2 of their lower income assistance programs, Empower and Assisted Home Performance, into a more streamlined system called Empower Plus, which should debut late spring or early summer of this year. So the first step to all of these programs is a home energy assessment or audit. So, you know, especially in our rural area, not every home is completely the best candidate for a heat pump right off the bat. You know, it may be really poorly insulated or have big leaky doors or things like that. And those are some things that we would want to have people address before they put in a heat pump so that you get the right size system in the end. You're not putting in something massive that you don't really need for the size of your home. You just need because your home was kind of leaky. So if your home's really leaky as mine is, you just lose a lot of energy no matter how efficient your heating system is. So this is a step where someone will come to your house and go through everything with you and kind of look at where there might be air sealing needs or things like that, and kind of make a plan with you. Proper insulation and air sealing ensures that your home gets the right size system when you make that move, and an auditor can help you determine what's the next step. And then after the audit, there's no obligation to move forward with that contractor on anything, but you can. And I will make this presentation available after, so that all of these links here that you see are clickable to NYSERDA's site, where you can find by county who would be an energy auditor working in your area. There are a bunch of kind of different kinds of home energy assessments and audits based on your income level. And those eligible for NYSERDA assistance qualify for a comprehensive energy audit. Market rate, which is the industry term for people that don't qualify for assistance, receive an assessment, but can often upgrade to a more comprehensive audit for an additional fee. So the assessment's a little bit more visual inspection, looking around, measuring the insulation, but it's not super in-depth. And I personally think the super in-depth one is one worth upgrading to, especially now that the Inflation Reduction Act will cover 30% of this up to $150 for people who don't qualify to have that be free. NYSERDA is also promoting a bunch of general energy saving measures through this. These are kind of the typical things that might be recommended on an energy audit. You can see how much heat you're losing from a door or from your attic or from things like that. And they can kind of make it make sense to you what to do next. And that may be a heat pump. It may be changing out your light bulbs. It really, really is unique to your home. Of course, for some of us, like there just isn't the money right now to do a big investment. So NYSERDA is also really in support of promoting low and no cost energy saving measures. We have a big comprehensive list that's also clickable from this slide of things you can do in your home that don't really cost much at all. So NYSERDA's financial assistance programs are divided right now into 3 parts: Comfort Home, Assisted Home Performance, and Empower. This is also a clickable link to see what program you qualify for. So you can just put in your information and see right away where you stand. If you qualify for heating or food assistance, you automatically qualify for Empower. The application process is streamlined considerably, and 100% of the project costs are covered. There can be other problems in your home that might disqualify it, such as a leaky roof or mold. And we at the Clean Energy Hub are hoping to be the people to connect you to the help to get those things taken care of, so that then you can utilize the NYSERDA funding down the line. Assisted Home Performance is the middle income tier. It provides about half of the project's cost, up to $5,000, determined by the average income in each county. The income thresholds were just substantially increased in 2023. So if you didn't previously qualify, it's worth checking again. I think for Columbia County, it went up almost $6,000. So that's great. The next is market rate. We'll use that term a lot. You'll see it on the NYSERDA website all over the place. It's not an intuitive one. So I like to make sure that people know that that is just kind of, you don't qualify for assistance to your market rate. They say you don't qualify for assistance, but there's actually a lot of benefits to that. You still qualify for the free energy assessment, not the full audit. You are able to utilize NYSERDA financing. You have all these tax-based and utility incentives. And an important one for us in Columbia County, who are seeing such a big rise in cost of living, is the property tax increase exemption, which means that you can do a bunch of insulation and get a heat pump, and your property taxes are not supposed to go up at all. Another part of the market rate program is a comfort home program, again, clickable to the contractors by county from this presentation. The comfort home is a seal and insulate package, which trained and qualified comfort home contractors can solve common problems like draft areas in your home and rooms that are difficult to keep cool in the summer. They reduce the occurrence of ice dams in winter, and incentives range from $1,000 to $4,000, depending on what you end up doing. Everyone pretty much qualifies for low interest financing through NYSERDA, which is great compared to most money that you can borrow right now. As you can see, it's interest rate as low as 3.9%. And the reason that they do that is they want, even if you have to take out a loan for these measures, they want your loan payment to be lower than the difference in your energy bills. So they want, if you reduce your fuel oil cost by $200 a month, you might be paying 150 of that and back in a loan for a few years, but then after that, it's just more and more savings. Besides the grants, for those that are income eligible through NYSERDA, there are also rebates and tax incentives. Tax incentives will be individual to their circumstances. And as with all tax rates, you should absolutely talk to a tax professional before you count on these. But if you do pay taxes, they would come in the form of reduction in what you pay the following tax season. Utility rebates work more quickly and come directly from the utility within weeks. Many times a contractor will actually take this off your estimate and submit the paperwork on your behalf, but be sure you ask and don't assume that. We've all heard a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal big legislation that is putting a lot of money into climate reduction and clean technologies. This is most of what we know about it right now that's coming through the federal side. The states will also be given a bunch of money from the federal government to distribute, and we do not have that information yet. It's rumored to be coming next fall as to how New York State will handle that, but it will be through NYSERDA. A major change in 2023 is that air source heat pumps and heat pump hot water heaters are now covered 30% of the cost up to $2,000. Previously, it was only $300 was the cap. So that's a really big change. So we're talking today about Heat Smart Capital Region, which is one part of this big energy hub. This is vetted contractors, and we also provide support for both income eligible and market rate customers. Recently, the Clean Energy Hub has taken over a very successful market rate campaign that was run by CDRCP for many years, and we've expanded the outreach to more historically underserved communities. Our contractors also go through an additional process to qualify. We have a two-path system where you can apply either for NYSERDA assistance right through our website or be put in direct contact with vendors. These are the 5 vendors that we're currently working with, and through these you can cover air source heat pumps, geothermal, as well as heat pump hot water heaters. And we have 2 of these vendors here tonight, Rycor and the Radiant Store, who will talk much more in depth about the technology and kind of help you determine what might be right for you. These are some resources, which again, will make this available so you can look into these things on your own, but there's a lot of information out there. This kind of tries to glean down the places where you might find the things that are most helpful. And there is my contact information, as well as Don Meltz, who may be on the call. He is the new Columbia County Climate Smart Communities Task Force Coordinator. So he'll be handling all sorts of clean technology for the county. And there's also Bradley Toll, who works for Cornell Cooperative Extension of Albany County, and he'll be handling Columbia County's energy advisement, which means if you are just not sure and you really need help applying for any of these things, he can really kind of hold your hand and explain it and really work with you one-on-one to make it easier. And I am going to stop sharing and pass it on over to Rob Penny from Rycor to talk about air source heat pumps.
Thank you, Christina. You do an incredible job with that. I really appreciate the setup there. Really teed it up well for me. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you guys all taking the time out of your evening on this snowstorm to learn about heat pumps. My name is Rob Penny. I work for Rycor HVAC. We are an HVAC company based out of New Paltz, New York. We do have a second location. We're in the process of opening up in the Albany County. So we'll have a second location a little closer to you guys in the near future. So that's always exciting. But I am going to share my screen so I can then put on my presentation for you. So what we're here today is to look at heat pumps. So let me get to my share screen. Perfect. And start presentation. So what I like to do is just kind of educate. That's a good basis our company, focus on is just overall education of a heat pump. Doing consultations in homes for the last 5 years, I've learned a lot of people just weren't aware of the technology. They wanted to do a heat pump, but they weren't sure. So they went with something else. They just put that new boiler in because they heard heat pumps couldn't work in our region or just weren't really confident. So what I really like doing is educating and really appreciate all of you guys, all 150 plus a year for coming out here and learning a little bit more about heat pumps. So what exactly is an air source heat pump? An air source heat pump is a device that can heat a building from transferring thermal energy from the outside air using a refrigeration cycle. So in English, what that means is we are essentially gaining heat from the outside air and bringing that heat inside. We use refrigerant as a bus. That's essentially what I like to refer to refrigerant as a bus. It picks up heat and it drops off heat. In the next slide, what you'll see here is how a heat pump works. Again, with a heat pump, it's a little bit different than what we're doing with our traditional legacy heating and cooling, as I like to call it. We're Northeasterners. We burn stuff. That's what we do. When we're cold, we burn oil, we burn propane, we burn natural gas, we burn wood. I've still seen some coal hanging around. We burn things. That's what we've just been accustomed to doing and what we've always done because we had to. We really didn't have many other alternatives. Geothermal came out, which we'll chat about. That was the first kind of heat pump that worked here in the Northeast. Recently, as I'm sure some of you guys have heard, air source heat pumps have made a big transitions here in the last decade and a half and now do a really, really good job in our region. So what a heat pump is doing essentially is moving energy. So in air conditioning mode, which is what this diagram here shows, is air conditioning doesn't create cold air. We're taking heat out of the home. That's what air conditioning does. The same way our refrigerators work, for example. What we do in air conditioning is you'll see this hot air entering the top of the unit. There's a heat exchanger full of refrigerant. Remember that bus. That air pulls through over the bus. That bus picks up some heat in that indoor unit. That unit then blows the air cooler into the house. And then this red pipe is bringing the heat outside to get blown out by that condenser. So air conditioning is simply removing heat. Minute by minute, taking a little bit of heat out of the air, taking some humidity out as well, bringing that all to the outside where we want it. Air conditioning season is pretty close, but it's not what we do. We're Northeasterners. We are people that heat. So the next slide is what I think is a whole lot more interesting. We've all had air conditioning and refrigerators, so we kind of always understood that concept or at least believe it's real, even if we don't understand it. The heating side is what I think is really important. And that's what I think makes the purpose of this all true. We're all here for either a couple of reasons. We're trying to lower our heating costs. With the cost of oil and propane and natural gas all rising, we're looking to be more efficient. Maybe your house doesn't have a lot of flexibility in its heating and cooling. You have one zone of heat or one zone of cooling, and you're looking to get more flexibility. Or you're looking to lower your carbon footprint. That was a big reason I did it. I bought a house with a 30-year-old oil burner, 30-year-old central air unit. They used as much energy as they possibly could. They were as inefficient as they could get. I converted them all over to 5 mini splits. I saved over 60% in what it cost to heat my house, over 40% of what it cost to cool my house, and got way more flexibility in heating and cooling. So, we're all here essentially to save money, save the planet. Those are our objectives. So in the heating mode is where I think all of those things happen. That's where we save our money. That's where we're going to have big reductions in our carbon footprint. So in heating mode, what we're doing is we're not creating heat. Again, that's what we're used to. We're used to combustion. We're creating heat. One big misconception with the heat pump is that it's electric heat. We've been told for years never to use electric heat. Looking for an apartment, if it's got electric heat, don't go there. Electric heat is the worst way you could heat your house. It is the least efficient way you can do it. It's the same technology as a toaster oven. There's no differences there. It's just a lot bigger. So with these systems, we're not using electric to create heat. That's the big misconception. What we're using with electricity is to turn on fans to move air and a compressor to move the refrigerant. That's why these are 3 to 4 times more efficient than electric heat. So what we do in heating mode, again, is using refrigerant. That refrigerant in that outdoor condenser is going to pull heat out of even a negative 20-degree day. If it's negative 18, negative 20 degrees, it's going to pull the heat out of that air. It's going to travel through the refrigerant lines and get added into your room temperature. The hardest thing for me to understand when I first started learning this as a Mitsubishi rep was, what do you mean we're pulling heat out of negative 10-degree air? There's no heat there. How are we taking heat out of there? How are you guys not using electric heat? That's what we've always used with heat pumps in those cold temperatures. And essentially what we're doing is we're using refrigerant that has less heat. Heat moves from where there's more to where there's less. That's the concept of how energy moves. If anyone here has a science background, they'll know the term absolute zero. Absolute zero is the absence of heat in this world. And all heat is 2 molecules moving against each other. That friction of molecules is heat. So you may have heard of 0-degree Kelvin. 0-degree Kelvin is the absence of heat. That's where those molecules are standing still. That's negative 459 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where there's no heat. So at negative 400, there's a little bit of heat. Negative 300, a little bit more. At negative 20, there's actually a lot of heat, but we're 98-degree people, so it doesn't feel too warm for us. But with refrigerant, that refrigerant will operate at like negative 50 degrees. So when that refrigerant's operating at those cold temperatures, it's able to extract heat out of the air. So essentially with a heat pump, what you're doing is recycling. That is what we're doing. We're saying, hey, we already know there's enough heat present outside. I don't need to create more. I don't need to combust more heat. We already have enough. Let's grab that heat and reuse it. Let's bring it back into the house. It's the same concept we've done with a lot of things in terms of recycling, but we're now essentially doing it with our heating. So that's what a heat pump is doing. It's pulling heat from outside, bringing it in. In this diagram, you'll see a ductless mini split. Those systems are what I put in my house. What I like with those is you have no efficiency loss of ductwork. You have the ability to zone the rooms as you see fit. That's nice for comfort in a lot of spaces. If you like a room 65, but another room 70, don't feel like you want to cool your living room all night long while you're cooling your bedroom at night. They give a lot of advantage in comfort and efficiency there. So that's just one example of how a heat pump works. Here is a couple different examples. In this left picture, you'll see again that same ductless mini split that mounts up on the wall. That one is my favorite model. It's one that people tend to say, I don't want to see that thing. That tends to be the one knock on heat pumps is just the aesthetic. But that unit there is I think the most incredible unit in the heating and cooling world. That unit on the wall actually has a built-in IC sensor is what it's called. And that IC sensor is a built-in thermal imager. It does a 3D evaluation of your space, identifying where the hot spots are, where the cold spots are. Then it has dual vents where it's able to direct the air in those areas to balance the need. So I have one mini split, for example, that heats and cools about 800 square feet of my house. It's all an open concept, living room, dining room, kitchen. I live in a raised ranch, and one unit does that entire space because of that thermal imager, very even temperature throughout it. The one on the right here, you'll see is their floor mount model. I really like that in finished attics. I think they look a little bit, more natural there. Older homes where we're replacing old radiators. A lot of times you take the radiator out, put a mini split floor mount right in its place, and you're able to kind of keep that same look within a house. Similar technologies all within them, just different ways to distribute. The one on the right over here, you'll see that is a ducted air handler that can replace a lot of central air systems, be able to provide you heating and cooling through duct systems as well. So, there's really a lot of flexible ways to install your, house with heat pumps. They make mini splits, they make ducted systems. There's even ways to do it through radiant floors and baseboard. Essentially, if there's a will, there's a way in terms of heat pumps. There's not they don't work here anymore. They don't have a way to make it look in my house. So there's a lot of flexibility. One thing Christina did an incredible job was really emphasizing NYSERDA. That is something I think we are incredibly blessed to have here in New York State. And I think it's something that every single homeowner should leverage every which way during this process, from the home energy audit to any which way they're, insulating their home or sealing their home, taking advantage of any incentives they have there. Whether it's solar or heat pumps, take advantage of your tax dollars at work is kind of what I always say. You're paying the taxes. Yeah, you might as well take advantage of the money there. So essentially, there's three kind of tiers within New York State's clean heat program for air source heat pumps. The first tier is for any time a homeowner does less than 90% of their heating BTUs. So a lot of times homeowners will have us come over to do their entire house conversion. They're done with fossil fuels. They want to convert their entire home. Or they want to put them in their 2 or 3 most commonly used spaces, their biggest return on investments, where they spend their most time. Other times people just want to put it in one room because they're tired of lugging that air conditioner in. I get a lot of calls this time of year of, Rob, last year was the last year I lugged that big unit in the living room. I need a mini split. Anytime you do less than 90% of the home, they give a $400 incentive with NYSEG or National Grid. They offer the same incentives through both of those utility companies. The second tier is when you cover at least 90% of your home. So we do what's called a manual J calculation, a lot of measurements of your home, evaluating your insulation and windows, building it all through an engineering program to identify what your heating and cooling loads are. Once we've identified that, if we're installing over 90% of it, a lot of times people might leave out the kid's bedroom that hasn't been used in 10 years, or the office that they leave the door open constantly to, some of that kind of scenarios. Anytime you cover 90% of the house, what they then give you is $1,000 for every 10,000 BTUs. That is when I say they start really showing the money and really putting a big dent in the investment for you. The third tier is the highest incentive tier they have. It's the best incentive tier, I think, if you have a really aging current fossil fuel burning system. If your boiler is over 20 years old, I think this is the one you should certainly investigate the most, because that system has a very short life at that point. It's on its last legs. You could limp it along for the next 10 years, or you could have New York State pay you to remove it, is essentially my concept in that. So once you've done 100% of your home, covered every square inch with a heat pump, and it's able to be a completely heated and cooled house with air source heat pumps, what they then give you is $1,400 per 10,000. What that additional money was geared toward was to pay for the oil tank removals, pay to take the boiler out, give a little extra money to the homeowner on top of it. Everything NYSERDA has based their incentives and financing around is essentially putting it in a position where a homeowner is paying similar to what they're paying for a boiler or a central air system. As Christina mentioned, which is something I think is huge and something I try to really, really let every customer know, is that the focus between the incentives, the interest rates, all this financing, the terms, was exactly as Christina mentioned, is, Rob, I spend $300 a month to heat and cool my house. My boiler failed. I don't have a penny to make this happen. The plans this year were not heating system. We were hoping we can limp this thing along a few more years. Well, $300 is quite a bit to heat and cool your house with. We run energy calculators. New York State requires it as part of the program. And what they kind of geared it towards was, if you're paying $300, well, then you could pay $150 towards the loan of these systems, and you could pay the $150 a month it takes to heat and cool with these systems. So you can pay exactly what you're paying now, but have a much cleaner, much more efficient zoned system with a 12-year warranty, and really set yourself up for the next 12 years with a warranty, no more service calls, and a lot less headaches while being a lot more efficient. That was kind of the whole concept around this, was making this possible for people of all walks of life. So I really, recommend taking advantage of every bit of the incentives NYSERDA offers, every bit of the financing that they offer. There's a lot of flexibility within what they offer with NYSERDA. Feel free to reach out to, Christina and anybody on her team. Of course, feel free to reach out to any of the contractors, participating in this event. We're all very well versed in this. I kind of joke and tell people we all have the same goals here. We want high efficiency systems in your house for a low price. Let's take advantage of every incentive financing option we can. We want to make this all happen. We all have the same goals. So the state incentives have been around for a few years. That's something we've kind of gotten lucky to have for a few years now in New York State is the Clean Heat Program. This program here is the Inflation Reduction Act, which Christina had touched on. I'm not going to go into it as long because Christina already touched on it, but there's now at a $2,000 federal tax credit. It is capped at 30% of the project and capped at $2,000. That can go towards heat pump water heaters. That can also go towards any air source heat pump as well. So highly recommend taking advantage of those incentives as well. They come back on your taxes, but just additional incentives, going towards this to make it happen for people. Just installation time frame, something I like to mention to people. We are just still in the pandemic life, if not still just kind of, etching our way out of it. There has been equipment delays and you name it. That's what we've been struggling with for the last couple of years. Here at Rycor, air source heat pumps are all that we do. We don't put in boilers. We don't put in furnaces. We don't do central air. We don't do plumbing. We don't do anything fossil fuel burning. We haven't done any of that in a very, very long time. We are just an air source heat pump company. So as I say, we have all our eggs in one basket. When the pandemic hit, we couldn't play around with equipment delays and things like that. So we stock, about 1,000 systems in our warehouse at all times. We install about 6,000 or 7,000 a year. So we have a team of over 30 technicians that are able to service and install these systems. Since these are all we do, we have an incredible proficiency with these. We install about 20 to 25 of them a day. So we're able to do 4 or 5 houses, every single day with our installation teams. So installations take 1 day to complete start to finish. Equipment and all the supplies are in stock. So there aren't really any lead times or anything in regards to that. So we're all in really good shape there. Here's a little contact info. One thing before the contact info, I want to chat a little bit is about geothermal. We here at Rycor don't do geothermal. We are just an air source heat pump company, but I always want to discuss all the options that we have available in heat pumps. Geothermal, like I said, was kind of the initial heat pump that we offer. That heat pump is really unique because it doesn't use the air like our systems use. We take heat out of the air with an air source heat pump. Geothermal, what they do is they dig deep into the ground with piping, and what they use is the Earth's constant temperature of 50. That is a very, very efficient way to heat and cool your house. It's traditionally used with ductwork. I have heard some rumblings of some companies being able to do it with radiators to be able to produce you heat there, but it's 99% of the time done through ducted systems. It is the most efficient way you can heat and cool your house. Air source is a little bit behind it because we deal with the air temperature changes outside. Geothermal does tend to have a little higher of an upfront investment for it, but again, has a high efficiency, and any heat pump you do essentially will have a very good return on investment compared to a fossil fuel burner. But geothermal is something I highly recommend people look into as well. Essentially what I recommend anyone considering, heat pumps or a new heating system or a cooling system is get a lot of opinions. Reach out to 4 or 5 different companies, do research online, get a very well-rounded outlook on it. I tell people all the time, this is a big investment, and not just financially, it's also just how long they last. Heating and cooling is every 25 years. That's how long you should be having this conversation next. So take your time, make sure you're leaving yourself flexibility for the next 25 years. I always say to look at what heating costs will be in 25 years. Is oil going to be here in 25 years? I don't think so. So I wouldn't recommend putting an oil burner in. Propane, natural gas, where are they going in the next 25 years? What we do know is we'll be using electricity. We'll be using it more efficiently as our solar and wind take off. That's kind of the future, is electrifying everything. Here's some contact information for you guys. Feel free to reach out anytime on phone or email. We offer free consultations and love to come out and meet you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was great. So Rob gave us a great overview, and now Terry Moog from the Radiant Store will be giving us a little bit of some more specific technologies.
Hi guys, I've been in HVAC energy in general, especially renewable, for 32 years. Went to RIT. I'm a NYSERDA Empower comfort home and market rate provider. So we do energy audits, and I started my company about 20 years ago, and I thought, it'd be interesting to go through the presentation that I put together just about how many iterations of a heat pump project there are, and especially touch on the water heating side of heat pumps and basically give an overview of, different projects that are local, around Columbia County. So you can kind of see the stuff that's going on in Columbia County. I'm going to share my screen also here. So hopefully we can figure this out. You guys got that? All right, what do I do, right?
All right, so hello, everybody. I'm just here.
I got my personal assistants because I was born in 1963. It's simple. Let's see. Technology.
Okay, yeah, and you can just,
There we go.
use the arrow
Got it.
keys to flip through the slide there.
So what you're looking at here is another type of heat pump. This is they call it an air to water heat pump. Rob did a great job of explaining, the air source side in terms of blowing hot air, but there's a lot of applications where it'd be nice to heat something with water. And, in terms of, hey, Rye. Yep. I just gotta, in terms of what this heat pump is doing, it's using same concept in terms of taking heat from the air, but it's injecting it into a large radiant slab inside this building on Route 9H in Hudson. It's New Leaf. How do you get to the next slide?
Yeah, you can just use the arrows here.
So what we got inside the building is we have these tanks that are full of an antifreeze mixture. And what we do is we send that antifreeze outside to those machines. It comes back in warm. And then we take all that warm water and we distribute it. This is a picture of the slab before we actually covered it with concrete. And essentially, that's the end of the story. You have a heat pump operating at about 300 or 400% efficiency. This building happens to be powered by solar and batteries. And so it's 100% net zero operation. Here's another example of using, this is a job we did recently. It's in Massachusetts. This is a very large, big PV system. He was using fossil fuels, and what we did was we put in a Swedish-made air-to-water chiller that has it has a very similar efficiency to geothermal. Inside, what we do is we move our refrigerant through this device here, which is basically acts as a heat exchanger and controls pump logic and a lot of different things. And this customer also has radiant heating. It's a very low temperature design, meaning you only need about 120-degree water to heat the building. What you're seeing next to this is we did an episode of This Old House about a year ago. We were asked to do a similar project. In this case, though, we are taking the same device and we're making hot air with it by injecting the hot water from the heat pump into a hot water coil, converting that to hot air for the ducted heat pump. We also are making our hot water with the outdoor heat pump in this beautiful tank that has 80 gallons of hot water in it. And also during the summer, we double as a cooling system. And this is a chilled water coil in this machine. So he also has a radiant zone that is attached to that. Here's another example of this is, again, an air to water system. We had a customer who put in a different brand heat pump inside the building. You'll see he's got a lot of going on here with an old oil boiler. He wanted to get rid of his oil bill. We got rid of his oil bill. He doesn't pay for oil anymore. Similar concept again, guys, with low temperature distribution using air to water heat pumps. Geothermal is part of this equation too, because ground to water is also used a lot to, in this case, we've got concrete floors that are stained that has all the radiant tubing in it. It requires very low water temperatures, maybe 85 degrees. It's really a minimalist house. This is the mechanical room. Again, you got a buffer tank that does chilled water and heated water. So there is a lot going on in terms of like, if you have a house and you want to build a house with radiant heat and you don't have to put in forced air, you can certainly use a heat pump. And you don't have to drill vertical wells or do horizontal wells, although it's perfectly legit. Great technology. These air to water systems are much more reasonably priced. How we get these temperatures to heat houses with really low temperature water is we put in, this is a project I'm in the middle of. It's a geothermal project, but this is all radiant flooring that we put in. It runs on about 100-degree water. And again, that would be appropriate for heating a building with a heat pump based low water temperature output, air to water, geothermal system. This is another example over here of a radiant application using a heat pump where it was an old farmhouse. We put tubing down and then we used a specialty concrete to pour over it because she was having trouble heating her kitchen. It was a big remodel. So again, low temperature, low water temp, radiant heating, even converting low temperature water to hot air are all possibilities of this type of heat pump. In terms of other types of distribution of heat, these are other projects I've done recently. You can see these radiators are very interesting. They're like artwork. We're running very low temperature water through these radiators. She put a couple in here as bookends. Got this spiral run over here. Again, very low temperature water, designer looks, you know. This project is very interesting. This is getting into a different area altogether. We just talked a lot about air to water heat pumps. All the applications can be done with that, radiant heating, hot air, all that. This customer had an old farmhouse with oil heat, hot air. And what we did was we put in a Bosch air source heat pump, which connects to an air handler, essentially. This little air handler over here, it heats the entire house. Bosch's heat pump works down to about 4 degrees below zero. And at some point, you'll notice here, there's a blue boiler. That still is a backup system. That was the original system in the house. Well, actually, we installed a new boiler. And over here, you'll see something very interesting. He's got a solar assisted heat pump, which we are the people that brought that to the United States. But this is a solar application using refrigerant to go out to an exterior solar panel, pick up heat and bring it back. So it's a really interesting technology. And this farmhouse went from, you know, $5,000 of oil a year to basically $1,200 of electricity. So it was a good move. I just want to talk generally about types of solar water heating and not solar water heating, excuse me, heat pump water heating. This heat pump over here in the basement of an older farmhouse, Ream heat pump, store-bought, Home Depot, $700 rebate from the grid, great value, great efficiency. I'm showing you a picture of a container that's coming over to us from the UK. These are solar heat pumps. They're using, instead of using the air around it, again, it goes through solar panels. And the last slide I have over here is really interesting technology developed in Asia. It's using CO2 as a refrigerant. It's called a Sandin heat pump water heater, and that has an outdoor unit on the wall. And then you have a indoor unit. And this particular application, he's a filmmaker in Tutson. We used a heat exchanger to take the heat from this tank, which is CO2 based heat pump heat, and we inject that heat to his radiant floor without, you know, sharing, you know, radiant floor water with potable water. That's the no-no. So interesting application, but a lot of water heater type things you can do. Here's a straightforward, very popular heat pump solution. Guy had an existing gas furnace. Bosch makes a companion system, which is a air source heat pump, does a great job and down to -4. Nice 2-stage gas furnace. That's going to run gas at temperatures maybe from 0 to 20 above. And from there on out, the heat pump covers it. So, you know, if you're not in a position to do the entire house on 100% heat pump and you can get away with 80 and you're happy about that, then that's a good solution, very cost effective. This is more like a ductless sort of scenario. We install VRF systems, which are systems that have many things attached to them. Typically, a VRF system will have, as many as 8 different devices attached to it. It's one unit on the outside with multiple units on the inside. And the multiple units can look like this slide here, where we've got a ductless in the corner. This is a system where we have it attached to an air handler in an attic, which has been spray foam. And then you have this ductless on the wall as well. Again, a variety of things can be hooked to a VRF system. The main advantage of VRF is flexibility, immensely long line set runs. You don't have a lot of stuff on the outside of your house. Then I also wanted to speak to the aesthetics a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see this real well, but this is a $1.5 million house in Hudson. I don't know if you see this, but we try to paint and prime all of our slim duct and all of our exterior overlays to match the house. I mean, if you looked at this house from a distance, or even this, the work's really clean. It doesn't have to be, unsightly. It doesn't have to be contrasting. We try to blend things in and really consider the aesthetics of the situation as much as possible. So yeah, there's a home for all kinds of technologies in Columbia County. You can heat water with heat pumps. You can heat air with heat pumps. You can do a ton. You can get it from the ground. You can get it from water. You can get it from the air. You can convert it to water. You can convert it to air. It's just tons of stuff you can do. It's a very viable technology that's been around for a while. And, that's really, we're just seeing a lot of really cool projects, but I really support what Christina is doing, and I support everybody, that's in this business, because it's really good for the environment is the bottom line. And again, I should mention, we're always talking about heat pumps, very high probability somebody in these slides has a decent sized solar system. So there's a lot of distributed energy involved with running these machines to make it a lot less expensive to heat in the long run. So that's about all I have to say at this point. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yep, do you want to stop sharing? You can get that red
Right here.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Terry. That was great. So many interesting different technologies there.
I
Some
think
really great possibilities. I'm just going to go through the questions in the chat. Some of them are pretty pointed to you, I think. So, sorry, a lot of people are messaging me directly, so I've got to just sort through here. Okay, Joshua asks, can you use air to water heat pumps to retrofit a hot water baseboard heating system?
Generally speaking, it depends on 2 conditions. This is a rather long answer, but the baseboard that you have now puts out per foot 550 BTUs. So if you look at that baseboard right now, that rating of 550 BTUs per linear foot is based on a temperature of 180 degrees. So you have to make a calculation on the front end to say, how much heat can I get out of 125 degree water in this particular baseboard? And let's say, for the sake of argument, it's 300 BTUs. So what you do is you measure all your fin and tube baseboard. You go around your house with a laptop with some special software, and you calculate the amount of heat required in this room on a 0 degree day to make this room 70. And then you compare it against the heat output of 125 degree water in the particular baseboard arrangement you have in that room. And if the numbers match, or you have more heat than you need, then you can use that device to heat your house with air to water heat pump. It just takes some upfront thinking, that's all.
Yeah, so this is where we go back to, it's really hard to know what's going to work for your particular house. And that's why we love an energy audit. We love people actually like going into the homes and looking at what's there, because every home is completely different. Even like 2 homes built that look identical, they may have had different renovations over the years. They may just have different functionalities to their furnaces. So that is really a nice feature of the NYSERDA programming is getting kind of eyes on the ground of what you need for your home. And as Terry and Rob both do offer free assessments, that's a great tool to have in there. Okay, Bonnie asks what refrigerant we used, and Rob answered primary refrigerant for heat pumps is R410A. Hillary, are there any NYSERDA incentives for a new build using heat pump technology? Are the programs just for retrofitting existing homes? For NYSERDA, I don't know. That's actually a great question. I don't think that you would. I'm going to get back to you, Hillary. You would be able to qualify for the utility incentives, and you would be able to qualify for the IRA, but I'm not sure about the NYSERDA loan system. So I will investigate that and get in contact with you. Oh, Rob answered the same thing. Okay, Jonathan, I know companies like SpacePack offered low temperature base boil fan coil units that can do heating and cooling. How much does needing to run the power to each fan coil unit increase the cost of the job? That might be something Terry could answer, but it might have to be something that would be more of an individual in-home answer.
Well, it sounded like he was referring to SpacePack, which is a manufacturer in Westfield, Massachusetts, and local representation is an old Chatham resident named Jim Bashford. So they're a good company and they do a great job. I think he was referring to low temperature air handling applications, and it sounded like in the concept that he was, at least I was garnering from his question, was like he was thinking about zoning using the air handlers themselves, maybe putting one up and one down. So basically, if you start zoning, just pretty much as a rule of thumb, that's going to average, about a 25% upcharge to a project when you start zoning in a context of a ductwork system. Not the same when we're talking mini splits or something like that, but yeah, there's definitely, more equipment means more money, generally speaking. But
Great. And then I see Dave Hall's hand up. You want to ask live? You're welcome to.
Yeah, I just put that in the room, but I have a couple of questions. First of all, it seems like refrigerant, despite its name, heats as well as cools. I'm wondering what environmental risks are there towards either creating this refrigerant or harvesting it if it's a natural product, or if it gets into the atmosphere?
Yep. So very, cute, observation there. They do heat and cool. Refrigerant is essentially a bus. So it's picking up heat, whether it's outside or inside and moving it. So I consider it a vessel. So the biggest concerns in terms of refrigerant is when it gets into the environment. So that is, after it leaks, after it's installed into a system. So a couple things with that is installation practices are the most crucial part to that. So Mitsubishi has torque specs to how their flare connection should be done. Everything needs to be leak tested and vacuumed. They have reclaim processes. After a system has stopped working, that old refrigerant gets reclaimed and sent back to be destroyed, so it's not, released into the environment. So it is completely it's most impactful to the environment when it's released. So making sure it's, installed properly and reclaimed is really the most important way. And in terms of the second question, will taking heat out of the air eventually help with lowering the global temperature? Essentially what, using a heat pump does environmentally for us is we are no longer contributing to the adding heat. So it probably won't reverse it because essentially you're moving energy. So matter can't be created nor destroyed, but we're no longer increasing that snowball effect.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, I think the other thing is GWP, or global warming potential, is a statistic that is kept very closely watched by Europe especially, but Europe's coming out with R32, which is a propane derived refrigerant. It's slightly flammable, whatever that means, but there's a lot of changing of the guard right now with relative to refrigerant. R32 seems to be the next thing that's coming out. According to Wiesmann, which is the people that originally started this research, it has the lowest global warming potential of all the refrigerants commercially available. CO2 also very good refrigerant, benign in terms of GWP. So the industry is on top of it, and they are rapidly phasing out 410A. At least in Europe, and it is getting this way over here in America. Daikin just is coming out with their new stuff that's all going to be R32. So it's constant change, but it's all going in a positive direction from a global warming perspective.
Thanks.
Rachel asks, are the incentives only owner occupied, or can I qualify to update a second home? So Rachel, we can talk about your particulars, but it would be likely that you would still qualify for the federal tax incentives and for utility rebates, but less likely that you would qualify for NYSERDA loans or NYSERDA grants rather. Abigail Penson asks if there's disadvantages to converting to a heat pump. I think we can all kind of speak to that. I think the thing that is discussed a lot is that they don't work in cold weather, which is no longer true. They're mostly working to -5, -4 degrees now, but there does seem to be a lot of older information out there that they don't work below 30 degrees. So that's the disadvantage I hear the most. Terry or Rob, do you have thoughts on that?
Saving too much money, doing too good for the environment. No, I'm just kidding. Really what it comes down to, I'd say the only disadvantage is really just the investment, I'd say. And it's not that the investment with a heat pump is, extraordinary compared to any other heating. It's just any heating investment, whether it's putting a new boiler in or new central air, and it has that same disadvantage of just spending a lot of money. But heat pumps are more efficient. They're cleaner. They take out the combustion and the carbon monoxide concerns. And no, on a day-to-day basis, in terms of operating costs or like cleanliness, certainly no disadvantages there.
And the maintenance is lower too.
Yeah.
John asks, since incentives seem to be based largely upon 10,000 BTU increments, how many BTUs does it take to heat and cool a house per square foot? So again, that's going to come down to what Rob was talking about with like the manual J, where they calculate your insulation, they calculate what side of your house your window's on, they look at all those sorts of things, and that's also where the energy audit comes in. Like if you have an inch gap under your front door, it's going to take more BTUs to heat your house than a house of the same footprint that's really nice and tight. So there's not a great answer for that I know. Really individual. Angus says disadvantage, lower temperature water. Do you mean it for a heat pump hot water heater, that it wouldn't get quite as hot as a heating oil one?
No, I mean the idea that it wouldn't work in your existing. The temperature water that you have isn't going to work in your existing radiators. I think that's
Yeah.
And so you're dealing with
true.
that challenge. So
Yep.
that's the disadvantage.
Yeah. If you're a radiator haver, that's definitely still a gap. Though we're hearing more and more about somebody coming up with something there, right in Albany, but it's not quite there yet. Is what we're hearing, but hopefully very soon. David asks, is it realistic to remove an oil burner completely for the increased rebate if they only go down to -5? Yeah, I mean, it does get below -5. That's real. What I would say is it's not like the heat pump just cuts off and you have no heat at all. It's just less efficient. So if it's -10 and you're trying to get your room to 70, it might get it to 60. Is that what you guys would agree with, Rob and Terry?
So I would say it's entirely based around which heat pump you pick. So we are unique. Like Terry's phenomenal. I'm really impressed with Terry and how wide he goes with heat pumps and everything he's able to do there. I mean, rocket scientist to say the least. We are a little more niched within Rycor. So the Mitsubishi products that we use, they're rated to negative 18 degrees, negative 18 real temperature, not negative 18 feel like. Wind chills are relevant. It's actual temperature. Anyone that's concerned of low ambient temperatures of those, I certainly say never trust a sales guy like myself, but I could send over some information from Town of Taconic Town Hall. They documented a lot during that cold snap we got, which we converted their whole building over to heat pumps and took their oil burner out. I could convert you, refer you over to a lot of people that have completely done that. As a company, we take out about 10, give or take, boilers and furnaces every week. We're installing about 20 to 25 homes. So about half of them are doing the full conversion and taking advantage of those additional incentives. So if you'd like any, recommendations there or, chat with anybody there, using the right equipment, absolutely no concerns these days.
Great. Douglas asks, will a given heat pump unit handle the different types of refrigerant as they evolve, or will new hardware be required?
That's a new hardware will be required. Kind of that's it, the pressures that like the old refrigerant was R22 and that worked at 100 PSI and the new refrigerant is 410A, that was 400 PSI. So all the equipment couldn't handle the pressures. It would just blow up if you tried to use that in the old equipment. So it's more of like, as the technology changes and the refrigerant changes, the pressure and all the components ratings all would have to, match up to whatever the changes are. But yeah.
But it would also be unlikely that you would change your refrigerant during the life of your unit, right?
Well, so these, like, if you look at the 94 Kyoto Accord with Bush 1, he legislated the riddance of R22 as a refrigerant and put it on a sliding scale. And by 2000 or so, we're starting to convert over to 410. And then by 2010, you could not buy R22 hardware anymore. So almost 20 years later is when we couldn't get R22, but the manufacturers are sneaky. So they came up with a drop-in replacement to put in old R22 equipment, which is some other chemical that has similar properties, but it's not R22, whatever, but it's a deeply bad refrigerant. The idea though, is that it will likely, you're going to be looking for another heat pump by the time you'd ever need another refrigerant. So that's what I would say. It's like a 20-year cycle usually. Yeah.
And then Ben asks, say step by step what a homeowner would go through the process to convert an existing home with assistance. What would the high level steps be? So Ben, I think the first thing to do would be apply for the assistance, which you can do right through the Heat Smart Capital Region website. It's on the enroll page. If there's a big button that says I qualify, you can check. There's a link right above it to make sure you qualify. But you would just apply there. It's a really simple form, and then you're in the NYSERDA system. You can still choose to work with one of our installers. You can email me and I can help to connect you to some really good energy auditors as well. Terry's one of them. And then that would be the process. Once you're applying for assistance, the next step is to have that home energy audit. That's something you don't skip if you can't skip if you're applying for the assistance. And someone will come to your house. They'll spend a couple hours with you going through measuring your insulation inside your walls and doing a blower door test and all these great things to really educate you about what's going on there. And they'll make basically a project plan for what's going to save the most energy. And that could be a heat pump, or that could be an insulation project, or that could be air sealing and then a heat pump. It really is super individual. And then your contractor, hopefully they are an Empower contractor, will help you with the paperwork, fill that all out with the state. You will get get a grant, get a loan, get both, and your project will be completed. Lee
I would add
asks,
to that.
oh yeah, please.
I would say that one of the neutrality factors in a process of getting an audit is, generally speaking, an auditor is there to give options. It's not a sales process. And, you know, I think it's good to just look at options and from a neutral point of view. So it's just more of a data collection and informing the homeowner type of visit. It's much more, it's a nice look at your house holistically, and then you can really start looking at options intelligently. And it's just a really good program. So sorry about that,
No,
interrupting you.
absolutely. That's really good. Sometimes, oftentimes an energy auditor will be an installation contractor, just because it is those are the people who have that expertise. They really understand the building science. So sometimes it will be somebody who's also going to be available if you would like them to do the installation project. And sometimes you want to go with a different person, but that's pretty up to you. If you really click with that person and want to use them, you can. If you want a more neutral perspective, you can have different people for all three phases of a project. The next question is, what happens in the case of an extended power outage? Well,
Bad thing.
Yeah, so that what happens when you lose power is, our systems, all stop working. Their systems are completely generated on electric, but you'd be in the same scenario you currently are with whatever type of heating system you currently use. Oil burners, furnaces, propane boilers, they all use electric to turn on their components, the circulators, the zone valves, thermostats, those kind of things. Obviously, your traditional legacy systems use less electricity. So you may be able to power them with a smaller generator than you may be able to with your heat pump systems. But essentially, whatever game plan you've had currently, I'd say for your extended power outages, whether it's a wood stove, a pellet stove, or a generator, our systems can work on generators as well. So that's kind of what I'd say is whatever plan A has been would be the same plan.
Is there a backup electric coil inside the air handler of my system? Rob, you seem to have answered this. Your heat pump may have an electric coil. Some manufacturers make them. The systems we install at Rycoller do not need the electric coil. Okay. If you get an audit and decide not to do anything, is there a potential penalty? No. Nope. You just learned something for free, which is always great if you qualify for the free one. Otherwise, the penalty is that you would have paid up front a little bit more for that education, but there's no obligation to go on with the program whatsoever. Don asks, I see a lot of wall and floor mounted inside units shown. Are there ceiling mounted heating and cooling units that you use? I've heard they don't work as well as the wall mounts.
Yeah, so Mitsubishi makes a bunch of different arrays of systems. They make their traditional wall and floors that we're familiar with, and then they make two different types of ceiling recessed units that are a little more traditional looking because they kind of recess in the ceiling. The one they've had for the longest is their just general box. It was designed for drop ceilings and kind of commercial environments. They were 2 foot by 2 foot, some even 3 foot by 3 foot. Those were their kind of original ceiling recessed. They came out with what they call their easy fit ceiling cassettes this year. Last year, those are 16 inches. So they're designed to fit between traditional joists. They're a little longer than most people anticipate. They're about 3.5 feet long. So they're a little bigger that way. I personally don't feel they work as well. It's the same technology in terms of, how heating and cooling works. What I've seen with those, it's just not as even of a temperature. It's a one-way cassette, so they don't distribute quite as well. Accessing the air filter seems to be a little more of a challenge for people because they're all the way up at the ceiling opposed to a little bit lower on the wall or floor. But that's kind of the main, philosophies around. They're a little less better in distribution, a little more expensive, a little tougher installation, but they do offer them.
Joshua asks, what size generator would you need to power a 50,000 BTU air-to-air heat pump system?
I wouldn't personally feel comfortable sizing that. What I would recommend doing is speaking with whoever currently has sized your generator. They're able to see what your current load is on the generator, what the well, the refrigerator, all that kind of stuff does. Whatever your installer is would be able to provide them, all the electrical information they'd be able to use. But there's a lot of variables that, HVAC companies typically can't handle there.
Great. Don asked, to get credits on heat pump installation, are you required to do the repairs found during an audit? So again, no, you don't have to do anything based on the audit. It's just like a nice game plan. You may change your mind about what your priority is based on something they find during the audit, but a lot of the heat pump credits are coming from the utility or from the federal government, and those aren't touched at all by the NYSERDA audits. What the audits can influence is how you might spend a grant if you're eligible for NYSERDA assistance. It's a no obligation, kind of a little bit of a guide for what you might want to do. You don't have to do anything, it says. What maintenance do heat pumps need? Annual cleaning, something else?
Yeah, so the name of the game with a heat pump is all about air movement. So what you want to do is keep a heat pump clean. The good thing with a heat pump is just the business of a heat pump isn't as dirty. When you're combusting, again, burning oil, burning propane, that big combustion process, there's a lot of dirtiness that comes along with it. With heat pumps, you just want to move them. So air source heat pumps are always installed off the ground. That's to get them above snow, away from mice and chipmunks, but also leaves, pollen, dirt, all the kind of things that can make them less efficient. Indoor air filters, whether it's ducted or ductless, you're going to want to either change or clean those depending on what type of system they are periodically. And then you're going to want to have a professional clean them. I personally don't feel every year is needed. I don't think they're the return on investment every year. I think every 2 to 3 years is kind of the sweet spot to get a heat pump cleaned, as long as it's thoroughly cleaned that time, which is completely cleaning that outdoor condenser, cleaning the indoor units, cleaning the blower wheels, again, whether it's ducted or ductless, cleaning those blower wheels, making sure they're clean, checking all refrigerant levels, all electrical consumptions, make sure everything's operating properly. You should get a professional to look at every 2 or 3 years, I believe.
Great. We have a few questions here about how many amps does a 50,000 BTU unit require at 240 volts?
The breaker size is 50. It requires like a 6-wire. So it's number 6 wire, 50 amp breaker. That's a big heat pump. It's running amps. What it actually is running and full load is maybe somewhere between 9 and 13 amps is your running amps typically. So over current protection is 50, but the actual amp draw is ranging from very, very low to, anywhere from 9 to 13 during the, typical operating. So
I weirdly spent a lot of time looking at engineering manuals the other day, and I actually wrote this down. So the biggest unit they make is a 48,000 BTU hyperheat. And when it's giving you its maximum capacity at 5 degrees, its maximum power draw is 7.91 kilowatts, to give you an idea. So that's everything it's got at 5 degrees.
So this is a question that I feel like there's a lot of differing opinions on. The 1 unit for an entire home versus several units. What is more efficient?
So in terms of operating cost, the most efficient is always individual single zone systems. The name of the game with heat pumps is all about moving of energy. More heat exchanger space, more efficient. So again, I was kind of diving into that same information with it. So when you're producing with single zones, if you have 3 single zone compressors versus 1 big compressor with 3 heads to it, those 3 individual systems are going to be anywhere from 25 to 40% more efficient. I'm an engineer from the trade, so if any questions there and I need any information on that, I'm more than happy to send it. But having more compressors outside is always a more efficient way. Produces efficiency a lot more. It's able to acquire more heat and produce more cooling that way. More heat exchanger space is the name of the game. So more condensers is always the more efficient way to do it.
I was going to say, I remember talking to I was having a conversation with this couple that was converting, and we were looking at geothermal, and then we were looking at the Carrier green speed setup. It's a, high efficiency, regular, very inexpensive compared to geothermal. So the guy was like, the COP on the Geo is 4 and the COP on the Carrier at 5 degrees Fahrenheit is 2.5. And, we're like, wow, that's significant. That's a 4 versus a big number, right? Little number. But when we did the analysis and we ran it through the software, the entire bill for the year changed by $120. That was it. And it was like the system price was like $60,000 more to get the delta of 120 out of that 2.5 versus 4 COP. So what I'm saying is, generally speaking, like these heat pumps are crazy efficient. I don't care what kind of heat pump you're putting in. They're 300-400% efficient. So valid points on that side of it. But in the long run, if somebody wants one VRF system and doesn't want to have 5 compressors, then, what are you giving up? Probably nominally, less than $50 a year, let's say, in efficiency. It's not a big number, if I had to guess, if you read the NEEP ratings. But that's the interesting thing. The public data, you can just go online and look up your heat pump model that you're interested in, go to NEEP, NEEP, pull the model number up. It gives you the efficiency right there, so you can compare. But in terms of getting into actual dollar cost and modeling your energy costs, that'd be something we would come out and take care of with you guys. And in general, we just help you through it and bring a laptop with us probably. Anyways, that's all I had for that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that seems to be a thing people, there's a lot of various opinions on.
Yeah.
A NYSERDA energy audit was done of my home around 7 years ago, but the company that did that was not responsive. The report, which came only after I called 5 times to nag them, didn't match what the technician told me, and some of it made no sense. Seemed that they were most interested in selling the costly insulation system, not addressing HVAC. Would it be possible to get another audit by a company that would return my phone calls and provide consistent information? I believe yes. Why don't you email me and we can get into the NYSERDA system and look at your case together? Because hopefully things are moving more efficiently there. Is what we're aiming for with these hubs, is to make the process, the NYSERDA assistance process, much more streamlined. Yeah. Are there any more questions? And everyone, I love that you're using the chat. That's so polite, but also feel free to just raise your hand if you want to chat live, or just speak out if you have a question. Will I be emailing the contact list? Yes, I will email the participants with the presentation that I gave with all the clickable links, and also a recording of this if people would like it.
Thanks for putting this together, Christina. You're awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. And thank you guys so much, all of you Columbia County residents, for coming. This is really, really encouraging that there were so many of you that were interested. So we talked a little bit about the county campaign. I'm not sure if Dawn or David want to speak any more about what the county's doing, since we still have some participants, but the only other thing I'll say is this isn't the last event in the county. We because we have those 13 municipalities, we will be doing some in-person events around the county. We're looking for town halls and activity buildings, things like that have heat pumps. So we'll be able to actually look at the unit, things like that. So people stay tuned for some more programming about that. We do actually have one that just got scheduled this week for March 23rd in Germantown at the Kellner Activity Building. So if anyone wants to come and see how that system is working, come on down to Germantown, Southern Columbia County. Oh, we got a new one. Natasha, we're renovating an old home. Does our main contractor need to be certified, or does every independent contractor, HVAC, et cetera, need certification? So Natasha, that would kind of come down to who's going to be doing your NYSERDA paperwork with you. Somebody's going to need to do that paperwork that works with NYSERDA to get the NYSERDA funding. But that is not necessarily true for the rebates or the federal things. And your contractor will know if they're capable of doing those things for you. I mean, the federal stuff, you should just need a receipt, and you would be able to, work with your tax preparer on that. But yeah, if you're trying to utilize the NYSERDA funding, someone on the job will need to be handling the NYSERDA paperwork for you. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the main contractor, I don't think, but somebody who will take on that responsibility for that main contractor.
And just to add one thing to that, if you are putting in any type of heat pump, whether it's geothermal or air sourced, that contractor will have to be a New York State clean heat contractor to be able to provide any of the incentives for you. I've unfortunately dealt with a lot of nightmares of homeowners that got heat pumps installed and their contractor told them that the homeowner had to apply for it, which they can't. So just make sure you're, with somebody with a clean heat program. NYSERDA has a website with other participating contractors. So just, make sure you're, with somebody that's able to get that rebate for you.
Yeah. Yeah. NYSERDA's website is not always the most intuitive, which we are aware of. So we are, that's part of why I tried to make everything in my presentation clickable, so you can just get right to where you need to be going. Because if you can get lost a little bit in there. And again, another great resource will be those energy auditors through the Clean Energy Hub. And for Columbia County, that will be Bradley Toll. I will send you all his information. He is working for Cornell Cooperative Extension out of Albany County. Okay, I think we are done with questions. If Don wants to introduce himself or David wants to speak at all, feel free. Otherwise, we'll just go about our way. Okay, doesn't sound like it. Then I think we will just have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your participation, and we will be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.